You can take all the supplements forever and ever and ever, but if you're not addressing the stress that keeps your nervous system in fight or flight, you will stay stuck and sick. If you're not addressing the emotions and you're swallowing them down instead of processing them, if you are living without boundaries or really leaky boundaries, then your gut is not going to feel safe enough to actually heal. Welcome back to the Daily Surrender. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about gut health. We're not going to talk about the foods that support your gut microbiome or the right probiotics that you should be taking. We're going to go beyond that. I've been practicing for close to 15 years as a coach. I started off in traditional health coaching. I soon, after opening the doors to my practice, thought I need to understand more about the interconnectedness in the human body. And I went to school and got certified in applied functional medicine, which changed my life, changed my ability to help people. And I have done at this point probably over 1,000 different gut quote unquote protocols. I don't love the word protocol, but let's call it protocol, regimen. And I've helped people with their gut because the gut is the epicenter of our body. It is so interconnected with all of the other physical functions in our body. And if we don't have good gut health, we don't have good overall health. But what I wanted to touch upon is when we're doing all the things, like we're taking the digestive enzymes, we're taking a good quality probiotic, we've done gut healing regimens. Perhaps you've used antimicrobials, or like me, you used copious amounts of mastic gum to get rid of H. pylori. You've cut out gluten, you've cut out dairy, you chew your food better. You've done all the gut healing protocols, and maybe you've done them over and over again. And yet your symptoms just keep creeping back. Maybe you feel better when you're, again, taking handfuls of supplements, but then you back off of them, or life gets a little stressful, and boom, your symptoms are back. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Today, I want to talk about what's really behind your persistent gut issues, beyond the supplements and the diets. Because if the root cause, and I'm talking root cause, is not addressed, the gut continues to take metaphorical punches. And it can feel like no matter how hard you try, your body just won't heal. It's very frustrating. I myself have been there before. So if this is you, buckle up. And if it's not, maybe this is just an interesting conversation, because we're going to be diving into the metaphysical. The metaphysical. So again, I've been coaching for close to 15 years, and I can't say that off the bat I looked for the metaphysical when my clients would come here. I always knew that everything is very interconnected, mind, body, and spirit. So we absolutely did look at whether they were in fight or flight, their emotional state, nervous system dysregulation. But I most often was looking at their symptoms of disease, getting underneath them, looking for the breakdown in function, getting underneath the breakdown in function, and looking at the cracks in the foundation, so to speak, of their overall health. And we would do a GI map. That was one of my favorite functional stool tests. And every single client that came through my practice for years would get a GI map. I don't practice like that anymore. Every single person doesn't get a GI map. But we would run the stool test, look at the imbalances. Perhaps there was overgrowth. Perhaps there was really low elastase, which would lead me to believe that we had really weak digestion. Maybe that was from an H. pylori infection. And we would take the supplements to try and shift the gut microbiome. And oftentimes it would shift. And there were many people that it would work amazingly well for, and they would go on their way after working with me for a few months. And then there were the clients that they would feel better, they would feel symptom relief, and then it would come back. And they would come back here. And we would do it all over again. And they would feel symptom relief. And then it would all come back. What I came to see was those were the clients that were really holding in a lot of trapped emotion into their body. They may have had patterns of behavior that weren't serving them, like chronic people pleasing, not using their voice. They may have been a lot of my empathic people, my highly sensitive clients were absorbing a lot of energy of people around them. They didn't know how to live with boundaries. They didn't have good nervous system regulating practices in place. So I began teaching more to those things, and I was noticing better shifts. I would invite them before we even did the gut work to calm down by perhaps gratitude practicing, doing some tapping, doing deep breathing, slowing their bodies down, going for walks instead of runs. And this taught me a lot through the years. So not only my work in helping other people, but then my own behind the scenes, because my own behind the scenes, I'll tell you that in a little bit, I was also struggling with some reoccurring gut issues because there were underlying things that weren't being addressed in my own health. So, this is why I'm so passionate about educating other people on the metaphysical root cause drivers of disease. And I'm talking about gut health specifically on this podcast because it's so common. I don't know that there's a person out there that has never ever felt any issues with their gut whatsoever. And sometimes, even when we're not symptomatic, like we might not have diarrhea or constipation or bloating, but when I take a look at your physiology, maybe looking at your labs or some functional tests, I can see how rooted things are in your gut. So it's such an important conversation for all of us. So, a little bit of my own personal story and experience with this. I did struggle in my 20s with IBS, and that was long before I was living a holistic life. It was a very allopathic approach that I was taking to my overall health. And I was not really able at the time to identify any of the drivers, whether it was food or medications or chronic overusage of antibiotics. I was on a lot of antibiotics growing up for reoccurring ear infections and strep throat. And so I began to look at all of those things and create shifts in my life. And it did bring me some symptom relief. That chronic IBS that I had that would swing from not being able to get off a toilet to not being able to go to the bathroom for 5, 6, 7 days, that changed. But I still always had different issues with my gut and then different dis-ease symptoms that were popping up that were very rooted in my gut. So I explored it, and in my early 20s, early to mid 20s, I did work with a therapist who introduced me to Louise Hay. And Louise Hay really opened my mind to the whole world of metaphysics. And so, through a variety of different seasons of my life and working with different practitioners and even an acupuncturist who did some work on me in a mind body way with some trapped limiting beliefs that were in my body while I was trying to get pregnant, I did start to see the connection between the mind and body. But for me, I couldn't really see the depths of why I was getting a recurrent H. pylori infection. Now, H. pylori is a bacteria that can live in our guts, and 40% of people actually carry H. pylori. And once you have it, it's commensal. So we really want to just knock it down so that it's in an undetectable level and it's not creating stress. What H. pylori can do when it overgrows is it releases an enzyme called urease. When it's released, it's neutralizing our stomach acid. And our stomach acid is so important for our overall digestion. It's like a really sharp knife that's chopping up all our food. We're chewing the food and it goes into our stomach, and then the stomach acid is released amongst other things, and it continues to break down the food, and then the food gets passed over and to our small intestine. Then there's a whole triggering process in there where it's going to trigger the release of digestive enzymes. And the requirement is that the food, when it's in that like liquidy state called chyme, that it's very acidic. But if we have low stomach acid and it's not acidic, it does not break down that food very well. And it also doesn't trigger the release of pancreatic enzymes, bile from the gallbladder. And so the food continues to go along, not being fully digested. We're not getting the nutrients we need out of it. That can lead to inflammation, food sensitivities, gut distress, gas, bloating, all kinds of things. So this was something that I struggled with over and over and over and over again. And I would do all the protocols over and over and over and over again. And it really became a wake up call for me because I realized, like, gosh, why is this continuing to come back? Like, I am fastidious with doing these regimens and then taking my betaine with HCl, which would support my stomach acid so that I wasn't creating an environment that was favorable. But I was relentless in it. But it just, again, it just kept popping back and popping back and popping back. And it wasn't until I met my former mentor, Molly. Well, she's still my mentor. She's just not physically with me, if you've heard me talk about her on other episodes. And when I came to Molly, that was one of my frustration points. It was like, I have H. pylori again. I've treated it so many times. I've done all the things. I've done copious amounts of mastic M amongst all the other stuff. I've done Matula tea, which is it's really quite effective for most people, but not for me. And it's super expensive and it comes from South Africa. And I was getting so incredibly frustrated with it. And off the bat, Molly said to me, Jen, it's not going to go away when you're in a state of hypervigilance, and you're in a state of hypervigilance. You're in sympathetic dominance. You're in fight or flight like all the time. If you listen to a couple episodes ago on people pleasing, I was fawning all the time. And in that, I was creating a very hospitable environment for H. pylori to continue to overgrow and overgrow and overgrow. And so she taught me, and I lived it firsthand, that we had to work on nervous system and calm down and get me out of constant fight or flight state before even taking supplements. Like, it was going to be a waste of my time, energy, and money if I were to take the supplements. So I did work with her for a few months before we even were bringing on the supplementation to holistically address the overgrowth of H. pylori. And I remember I tested to see if it was gone, and it was gone. And I was like, whoa. Because she had me on a lighter protocol than I had been on many times before, too. Like, we didn't go in and hit it with the heavy guns. That I had gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm throwing the kitchen sink at this thing. We didn't do that. And Molly really taught me firsthand the power of our mind and body connection. So, metaphysically, what was happening was my body was asking me, what in your life, Jen, are you not digesting? What feels toxic? What feels inflammatory? What's like eroding my inner protection? So like the stomach lining itself, because H. pylori can create an erosion called gastritis of the lining of the stomach that can lead to ulcers and even put you at a higher risk for stomach cancer. So we really had to take a look. I had to take a look at, like, what am I not digesting? What is eroding me inside out? And it wasn't until I dove into that and addressed that my body finally stopped becoming a very hospitable atmosphere for H. pylori. Because again, H. pylori literally breaks down the gut lining, and that's the very tissue that's meant to protect and nourish us. So metaphorically, the H. pylori mirrored how I was letting stress and unprocessed emotions and even relationships in my life break down my own inner boundaries. I wasn't just struggling to digest food. I was struggling to digest life. So when we think about the gut, we often only think of food and bacteria. But energetically, the gut is our center of discernment. It's where we take in, assimilate, and eliminate, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Leaky gut can symbolize leaky boundaries, taking on what is not ours. Constipation can point to holding on too tightly, resisting letting go. I worked with a beautiful young woman back. I think we first did our coaching work together in 2020. She came back this past year for another round of coaching with me, which was beautiful because she had hit another layer in her growth and evolution. But when we first started working together, her story was fascinating. She grew up in quite an abusive home. And there, unfortunately, was even some sexual abuse, and mom just really dysfunctional. And she, in order to survive that, she became really tough. She could not show emotion. And when we started working together, she had said to me, I never cry. And I knew she was a toughie. Like, she was a tough one. She put herself through college. She bought her own home. She had a career as a teacher. Like, she was really doing the things to break free of this very dysfunctional upbringing. And she became fiercely independent. And yet, she was not digesting a lot of these emotions from the experiences in her life. She didn't know what to do with them. People didn't hear her. They didn't listen to her. They weren't respecting her experiences. So again, she learned how to shove it all down and toughen up, armor up, not cry. Oh, she came to me with chronic constipation. I mean, so chronic, she would go even weeks. I mean, when I first met with her, the longest she had ever gone without having a bowel movement was almost a month, which blew my mind. But she was maybe having one bowel movement a week. Let me tell you, that's not healthy. Like, we should be going minimum one time a day, ideally 2 to 3 times a day, easy. Bristol stool chart, you can look that up, like a number 4. You want it to look like healthy dog poop, right? No undigested food in the stool. So we're making some changes in her diet, of course, making sure she's properly hydrated, doing a GI map. Of course, I see all kinds of bacterial overgrowth because we're trapping bacteria into the large and small intestine. And yet it wasn't enough. So what we did together in our work was we did a lot of talking and digging into the repressed emotions. And I realized early on that it was hard for her to even express herself to me. So I invited her to do writing and would give her journal prompts, and she would reflect back to me. And one day, the floodgates opened with her. She was digging into some prompts that I had written to her, and she just really got into a flow, and she started to write and write and write and write. And then the floodgates opened and she cried. This is like the first time she had really, really cried since being a child. And she just found herself sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And then she went to the bathroom and had the biggest bowel movement of her entire life. That was the most eye-opening experience for her. It was life-changing, actually. And she was really able to make that connection between her emotions, her repression of the emotions, not digesting life, and her physical body. And I love her so much, and her tenacity and her dedication to her own healing, because she just kept leaning in and leaning in and leaning in. And when she came back to me almost 5 years later to do another rounds with me, she's like, I cry all the time. I mean, she cried so freely in our sessions and really opening up, and continued to do deep work with her therapist. So sharing that story with you, because you can see how it was just, it's not enough. Again, we were doing supplementation and other gut work, but it was not enough for her. It was so metaphysical. So let's get back to some other common dynamics that we're looking at. So diarrhea. So if you're someone who struggles with liquidy loose stools or diarrhea, that can reflect fear and urgency and an inability to hold in whatever we take in. Then maybe you have, like I did, H. pylori and erosion. Maybe you have an ulcer, gastritis. That it's about chronic attacks to our inner integrity. Those moments in life where we feel like we're getting gut punched, worn down, not safe. We're not safe, not defended, right? We have weak digestion. Digestion is so important in having strong digestive fire because it's our first line of defense. If we have weak digestion, we're not safe. We're not defended. So if that's a reoccurring issue for you, you want to take a look at where you're not safe in your life. I'm not talking like literal physical. Where do you not feel safe? Are you in relationships that you don't feel safe in? Are you unexpressed in your voice, in your emotion, in your truth? Do you even know what your truth is? So important. This is why we can do all the things and they don't always work if we're not going deeper. You can take all the supplements forever and ever and ever, but if you're not addressing the stress that keeps your nervous system in fight or flight, you will stay stuck and sick. If you're not addressing the emotions and you're swallowing them down instead of processing them, it's going to affect you. If you are living without boundaries or really leaky boundaries, then your gut is not going to feel safe enough to actually heal. Think about the gut lining. That is a boundary. We need really strong integrity in the gut lining. So if you have leaky boundaries in your life, you most likely are compromising your gut boundary, the gut lining itself. I had to stop chasing the next fix and start getting really honest with myself and asking the deeper questions. What in my life feels undigestible right now? What am I avoiding or suppressing that is literally sitting in my gut, fermenting, inflaming me from the inside out? That is where the real healing begins. When we get really honest with ourselves, when we're humble and we take a look at what is there underneath the surface that's driving the physical disease. So if you were listening to this and you're like, whoa, I didn't think about any of this stuff before, but I have a lot of things spinning through my head right now. I'm going to give you a couple practical steps. I always like to balance the metaphysical and the practical. So if you're listening and you are struggling with gut issues of any kind, but we all have guts. So hang on if you don't have any digestive issues whatsoever, because you can still support your gut health and your overall health with these few simple steps. So, number one, pause and listen. Instead of reaching for the next supplement, ask your gut this question: what am I not digesting right now? And then journal it. Journal it. Write it down. If you're not a journaler, use the voice note on your phone and just speak it out. But get it up and out. Be honest with yourself. Number two, support your nervous system. The gut and the nervous system are one continuous highway. Deep breathing, prayer, grounding, time in nature, they all actually help your gut more than any other pill. Seriously. Getting your feet on the earth, your eyes in the sunshine, out in nature, in creation. You're connecting with the creator when you're out in creation. If you're not doing any of these things, if you're a shallow breather, it's impacting your gut health. So save yourself some money on supplements and get really solid in this before you go. And then maybe you do have some cleanup to do and you do need some supplementation, but make sure that you're supporting your nervous system. Chew your food with presence, literally and figuratively. Slow down. The act of chewing is symbolic of digesting life more intentionally. The last one is seek support. Sometimes we need a guide to help us see what we cannot see ourselves. You are listening to someone who has been coaching for 15 years, who has a lot of education. I mean, a lot of education. I was obsessed with educating myself for a long period of time, not just so I can help other people, but so I can help myself. And I came to a point where I needed to hire someone. I had to hire someone else to be my guide because I was driving myself insane. I could not see what I could not see because I was so close up to it because I was living it. I needed someone with strong love to hold a mirror to show me those places that I was avoiding, those places where my amygdala said, no, 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 don't touch that. That's not safe to go there. Right. So if that's you, find someone. If you desire help, you can reach out to me. You can book a soul body discovery call. We can hop on a call and talk about which of my programs might be helpful to you. I'm reopening my group program in January, the Vibrant Rise Functional Wellness Collective, where you can collectively learn how to support your overall well being. And we'll cover all the things, including gut health and nervous system support, all of it. We'll do it together. Maybe you want one on one coaching. Maybe you want to do a freedom journey and really get into your constructs in an intensive 6-hour session. So if this resonates with you, and if you're tired of chasing your tail with gut healing, the supplements, the diets, the endless protocols, and you sense that there's a deeper layer calling for your attention, I would love to walk alongside of you. As I said, you can book a soul body discovery call to explore any options of working with me. So take a deep breath and remember, you are not broken. Your gut is simply inviting you to a deeper level of healing. I can tell you that I am so grateful for those repeated H. pylori infections because of where they invited me to go. I was very stubborn for a long time and I didn't know what I didn't know. But I'm incredibly grateful that my body is so divinely designed, just as yours is. And it's always protecting us and messaging us and calling us higher. Until next time, my friends, continue the daily surrender and the stepping into the abundant life that God has available for you. Thank you for joining me on the Daily Surrender. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Send me a message, share this with a friend, or leave a review. Remember, true healing and freedom come when we let go, surrender, and trust that God's way is so much better than our way. Until next time, my friends, keep surrendering, keep rising, and keep walking in peace.